I see a caller from the 865 area code. Who do we have on the phone?
I'm on it.
I see a caller from the 865 area code. Who do we have on the phone?
Rich Balcom from Pasco County.
Hey, Rich, how are you? I'll put your name up there. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. Thanks. Good afternoon to all.
Looks like I came back with the video this time. Do you see that?
Yes, we can see you.
Great. Looks like I came back with the video this time. Do you see that?
Yes, we can see you.
Anybody else hearing everything twice there?
Yes, I did. Chris, did you hear the echo?
I heard the echo as well. This is Bill.
Good. Chris, did you hear the echo?
I heard the echo as well.
I don't know. I'm sorry, I know that.
Should have resolved the echo. It was part of a YouTube stream that I had up, but we've taken that down. So I believe that's been resolved. And it is 1:30, so I'm going to take down our shared screen. And Bill, you can proceed whenever you'd like.
Okay. Just do a sound check. Do you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Speaking, but I don't hear him.
Because the sound is turned off. And I can't get to the icon. I didn't do it beforehand. I hate getting out of the screen. That was my fault, Bob.
Okay.
I was trying to get to this. So you have sound.
Bob, can you hear anything?
I can hear you now.
Bob, whenever you speak, you are speaking very loudly.
Okay. I'm a little close to the screen.
And Bob, you may want to leave your microphone on mute unless you're addressing the board. That might help too.
Let's see, how do we get to mute? I think it was over here somewhere.
Lower left-hand corner.
I'm going to mute you, Bob. I got the control. I'm going to mute you right now. Hi, Bob. Bob is muted. If he needs unmuted, I can unmute him as well if we call him in the roll, Bill.
Okay. Well, we can call this meeting to order. It is April 15th. It is 1:32. Do we have the appropriate recording going on?
We do. We're proceeding. We're
Okay.
streaming to YouTube. Correct.
All right. We can just to make sure that we have who we have. Jennifer, would you call the roll?
Yes. Bob Hinion, We know he's here. Okay. Bill Roberts,
Here.
Brian Kazmarkowski, Bob Widmer,
I'm here.
Josh Frank, Richard Bedford, Kelly Miller, Richard Balcom,
I'm here.
okay. Travis Norton,
Here.
Leonardo Desorts. I probably butchered your name, I'm sorry.
Leo Dosorats, no problem.
Okay. Bill Johnson,
Here.
David Goodwin, Tyler Hudson, Rick Richmond, Rob Seacrew,
Here.
Karen Mullins,
Here.
Walter O'Rourke, and then last but not least, Sarah Calhoun. I'm sorry, are you there, Sarah? Okay. I thought I heard something, but I'm gonna assume that she's not there. Okay, so we definitely have quorum, so we are all set to go.
Okay, great. Well, folks, this is an experiment, prototype, and maybe a little rough, but would ask everybody's cooperation along the way. Are there any members of the public that have, or I guess I'm supposed to read something here. Persons wishing to address the committee can do so in two ways. Either email your comments to publiccomments@tbarta.com, and your comments will be read into the record. Please indicate which agenda item you want to have them related to, or to speak during the meeting, phone area code 267-866-0999, and there is an access code 1234351876, and you will be queued to speak to a staff member and then be able to provide up to 3 minutes of public comment when recognized by the chairman. This public comment period may be extended for up to 30 minutes. Are there any questions from anybody on the process for operating the meeting? And to request speaking, all we do is start speaking, or is there a, I thought there was a hand up kind of thing. Yeah, okay. If you open a participant screen, you will see all the participants, and there is a option in there to raise your hand. I believe that Chris is going to be sort of controlling the this and helping us along the way. So thank you, Chris. First agenda item is the consent agenda item, which is the, oh, I need to ask you one other thing. When you are speaking, please identify yourself prior to when you're speaking, like, this is Bill, I'd like to speak. Or if you're saying, this is Bill, I make a motion, da, 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 or I second this motion, that was Bill Johnson. So that way we can record all comments. And also we will be doing a roll call vote because it's a little hard to identify all the voices in a conversation. So back to consent agenda item. Are there any corrections to the meeting minutes of February 12th? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Karen Mullins, motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Bob Widmar, second.
Thank you.
Okay, I will have to take a roll call now just to make sure that everybody, what your vote's going to be on that. So Bob Henyon.
The boys the boxcars together.
Do you approve?
Call
minutes?
Bob now if I unmuted him.
Bob, can you hear me?
Yes.
Do you-
Aye.
Aye, okay. Bill Roberts,
Yes.
okay. Bob Widmer,
Yes.
Richard Balcom,
Yes.
Travis Norton,
Boxcars,
Yes.
train tracks,
Leonardo,
planes.
Yes.
Bill Johnson,
Yes.
Rob Seacrew,
Yes.
and Karen Mullins.
Yes.
Is there anybody out there that I did not call? Okay, motion passes, all A's.
All right, thank you very much. Next item is the presentation. And this is an action item. It's on Envision 2030. And we are being asked to consider making an endorsement for the presented Envision 2030 executive summary and the draft final report. Both of these documents were on the TBARTA website. And when you went to look at the agenda and it for the meeting date, and it did have both of these documents there. I believe, Chris, do you know this is going to introduce this?
Wasn't prepared to introduce it, but I will introduce it. Bill Ball will be giving the presentation on the draft final report to the Citizens Advisory Committee. Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Chair, this is Bill Ball. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm pleased to be back in front of the committee today to present the draft Envision 2030 plan for the CAC consideration. Basically, we're going to cover three main things today. And the first is I want to highlight the regional transit vision itself. Then we're going to talk about pulling back from that vision as to what we think is most appropriate for the next 10 years, our Envision 2030 10-year plan. And then I'll close with the summary of some of the key calls to action and recommendations that we included in the report as well. You'll recall that we talked with the committees and we spent a lot of time talking with the TBARTA board about how to define regional transit. And it's pretty straightforward what we ended up with, but it's any regional transit project that crosses county lines and any transit project where a phase of it would ultimately across county lines. And that's the, go ahead, Chris. We have agreement from the board on that high level definition. They did give me some additional guidance, and that was the emphasis on increased coordination with the member governments when we're talking about any regional transit project, as much as we can possibly do. And then also our focus in putting these regional projects together should be first on commuters, and then secondly on providing premium transit services that focus on commuters. Next slide. So how did we come up with that regional transit vision network? Well, we did rely a lot on the work that's already been done in the past. That was work from the transit agencies, work from the MPOs. You'll recall the previous regional transit feasibility plan and we sat down and talked with each of the local transit operators as well. We did our own technical analysis along the way. And of course, we had quite a bit of public outreach throughout as well. So where we are now is we basically want to present that vision. Next slide. So an important distinction here is that we want to distinguish between what portions of the vision we're proposing to be TBARTA's responsibility versus what would continue to be local agency responsibility, but yet still very important for the regional vision. This first map shows two things. It shows the regional rapid transit corridor that TBARTA is working on, and that's that premium corridor connecting downtown St. Pete over to the city of Tampa and up to Wesley Chapel, and also the 5 intermodal centers that the Florida DOT is evaluating along that corridor as well. The next one shows other regional rapid transit, and this is the green corridor that you see on the map. And that's basically crossing the Gandy Bridge, providing another connection between Hillsborough and Pinellas. Next is the rail transit corridor. These are the existing CSX rail corridors that have the potential for future opportunity throughout the region as part of Envision 2030. Next, passenger ferry services. You're aware of the seasonal service that's there today between downtown Tampa and downtown St. Pete. We're also looking at making that permanent, as well as the connection between South Hillsborough and MacDill Air Force Base. And also in Manatee County, we had discussions with their commissioners about a future passenger ferry connection between downtown St. Pete and the city of Palmetto.
Hey, Bill, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. Your speaker started to cut out a little, or I should say your microphone got a little tinny there. So I want to give you a second to see if you want to look at that. I don't know if the plug was getting a little loose there. Give me a little check. Say something now.
This is a test.
You're better. I'll let you get back on. Yeah, you're good now. Thank you.
Okay. And then the final layer that you'll bring in the next slide, Chris, is the express bus layer. That's the orange lines. And these are regional express bus routes throughout the 5-county region that you see on this map. This map is important because it shows what we're proposing to be TBARTA responsibility. The next slides basically show existing regionally significant local routes. These would continue to be local agency responsibility. And then the next layer is the proposed regionally significant local routes that would, in theory, come online at some point in the future that are important and regionally significant, but still local agency responsibility. In the end, in the next slide, we basically have both. This includes both TBARTA responsibility and local agency responsibility in a single regional transit vision. And this is what we're proposing that we start with as our vision. And this is not constrained to 2030. This is unconstrained by any year or funding amount, but this would be our ultimate vision going forward. Next slide. The other thing we want to emphasize is that there are a number of major regional transit projects that are already in project development and planning today. And we thought it's important to emphasize those, what they are, and then what stage they are in their development. This map shows, for example, the regional rapid transit. It shows the passenger ferry services. It shows the Central Avenue BRT, the Florida Avenue BRT, the streetcar extension in Tampa, and the CSX connection between downtown Tampa and USF. So a number of major regional transit projects that are already in the development process. These same projects are indicated on this slide so you can get an idea of where they are in their development. For example, the Central Avenue BRT is the one that's furthest along. It's in final design. It's the orange bar there. The other two that are in conceptual design, regional rapid transit and the streetcar extension in Tampa. So something that TBARTA will continue to monitor going forward. So the board and its committees and the public can get a good gauge of where each of these projects are in their project development and how they relate to each other. Now, we took that regional transit vision and we put together basic alternatives, put together evaluation criteria, and basically ranked the alternatives to come up with the kinds of investments that we propose make the most sense over the next 10 years, which would be Envision 2030. And I'll start with the next slide, which is the short-term regional priorities. And this is basically improvements to existing regional routes that are on that network today. And what I'll emphasize is the final column of this table that proposes that some of these services that are operated today would ultimately be the responsibility of TBARTA and part of their regional responsibility with regional transit. And that's the 100X on Gandy, the 300X on the Howard Franklin, and the Skyway connection that's on the Skyway Bridge between Manatee and Pinellas. The others would continue to be operated locally and local responsibility, but still important to the regional network. The next slide is the long-term regional projects. These are the major premium transit projects that we identified as priorities on the left and the major regional express bus routes on the right. And we're going to be working on integrating them into a number of scenarios that I'll summarize in this presentation in the next few slides. So we put together 3 basic scenarios that are basically 3 different levels of transit investment, along with 3 different assumptions regarding the revenues that are currently available based on projections. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each scenario. The first one is basically status quo, maintaining what's out there today, and that would include funding the operations at today with a focus on Commute Tampa Bay, the van pools, the commuter services that are currently offered, and continuing the focus on planning, which would be moving forward with the Regional Rapid Transit Study, the Innovative Transit Technology Study, and other Envision 2030 major progress reports down the road. In this scenario, it's status quo, so there's no new revenue sources identified. The next scenario, which is what we're calling the low impact scenario, is basically building upon the status quo. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. And then basically here, we're talking about transferring some of that responsibility of those existing regional express bus routes over to TBARTA, at least proposing that, and then making some improvements to those routes based on what we identify in Envision 2030. It would include the capital expenses associated with those routes, mostly related to the buses. And then it would also include some planning efforts to evaluate further the regional transportation disadvantage needs and whether there are gaps that TBARTA needs to fill. On the revenue side, we assume that TBARTA becomes eligible for the state block grant, which in theory they are doing by adopting this plan. And that it also assumes that the 5 counties in the TBARTA region would chip in to fulfill the local match requirement for those state block grants. And then the other new revenue source would be those regional services that in theory would come over to TBARTA. They have some existing funding sources through the Urban Corridor Program from FDOT. It is assumed that those revenue sources would come with those services to help fund the same services with TBARTA. The next scenario, we're calling the high impact scenario. This is where we start with the low impact and then we make much more substantial transit investments, including 6 new express bus routes that serve the region, as well as the first phase of the regional rapid transit, which for now, we don't really know the answer to this yet since the project is underway. We've assumed a phase 1 of downtown St. Pete to downtown Tampa as a starting point in the next 10 years. The other things that it would include is the capital associated with, go back for that, Chris. The other is the capital associated with those services, as well as the intermodal centers at West Shore and Gateway that would be implemented as part of that first phase of regional rapid transit. On the planning side, I wanted to emphasize that this includes a PD&E study or a more detailed planning study to look at the extension of the regional rapid transit down into Manatee and Sarasota, something that District 1 is interested in exploring as part of the next stage of development as well. On the revenue side, we did assume some additional state block grant based on some precedent that we observed in South Florida, where Tri-Rail is actually given 10% credit of the regional population for that formula allocation from the state. So we looked at that possibility here to see what that might generate if TBARTA were to get some of that population assigned to them for the purposes of their state block grant allocation. Next slide. All right, so this is the high impact scenario, scenario 3, that's illustrated in a map. It basically shows the portion of the vision that we're talking about and recommending consideration as the preferred scenario for the Envision 2030 plan. So you can see all of the projects that we talked about in that map. Now, how much does it cost? Let's start with operating costs first. And this is a cost for the entire 10-year period, not an annual cost, but for the entire 10-year period from 2021 to 2030. And that operating cost in the status quo goes from about 42 million to 81 million in the low impact, and then 181 million in the high impact. And again, this is operating costs. Then we add the revenues that we've assumed to be available at this point, and you can see that we're balanced in the status quo, that we have a deficit in the low impact scenario, which is about $23 million deficit, and then a pretty substantial deficit in the high impact scenario, which is almost 100 million. And that's the operating cost side. The next slide basically shows the capital cost. You look at capital costs, they're fairly low on the status quo and low impact scenario, and then they jump up pretty considerably when we start making major transit capital investments in the high impact scenario. You look at revenues, we're basically covered in the status quo. We have a small deficit in the low impact, and then of course the major deficit in that high impact scenario of 409 million. All right, so basically where we went from here is there's a call to action that we developed, and it's organized into 3 major areas: policy, funding, and communication and collaboration. If you look at all of those, it basically, we have 13 specific action items and 26 recommendations. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of them in the presentation, but I want to hit some highlights for each of these 3 areas. The first one is the policy call to action. Go ahead, Chris. And what I want to emphasize here is just the importance of the committees endorsing the plan, the TBARTA board adopting the plan, and ultimately presenting this to all of the partners throughout the region for their hopefully get their support as well. And not only presenting this plan to them this year, but continuing to present them at least annually to give them an update on the progress with implementation. The key here that we'll emphasize in a couple of these remaining slides is the importance of establishing a blue ribbon committee that would be made up of stakeholders throughout the 5-county region, that they would be involved in helping guide the implementation of Envision 2030. Next slide. The next area is the funding call to action. And the first one is critical. To date, TBARTA has been able to get on an annual basis an earmark from the state legislature to fund their agency. It is in the budget that was passed this year that's gone to the governor. And basically, they're having to request that on an annual basis. So the target here would to get that to be a dedicated funding part of the annual budget rather than being an annual request. The second one is we must secure those formal interlocal agreements with the counties to now allow us to basically have that local match to match the state block grant that comes from the state on an annual basis as this goes forward. And to give you a sense of how much that is, currently the counties contribute about $550,000 in the current year. And if we were to implement the high impact scenario, then that goes up to about gradually, but over the years, up to about 1.6 million in the 10th year. So it's a gradual increase from 550,000 to 1.6 million. The third and fourth ones are go back for a second, Chris. The third and fourth ones are really important that's right, you're right, are really important because, and that's what the Blue Ribbon Committee is going to help TBARTA do, is really pursue dedicated funding for the implementation of transit projects. And likely the solution there is going to require some type of legislative change at the state level that would make that happen. So we really need that Blue Ribbon Committee to help develop support and help develop the support at different levels that I'll talk about in the next slide. This final area is the commitment and collaboration. And bottom line is we need champions at the board level. We need champions at the state legislative delegation level. We need champions from each county commission, and we need grassroots support. That was one of the items that the CAC brought up at our last meeting with you that we also included as a key action item in this recommendations, as well as the importance of generating both business support and grassroots support. So we also need resolutions of support from each of the partners, from each of the county commissions and HART and PSTA. And the bottom line is a more continuous collaboration and coordination process, presenting annually to our partners about the progress of implementation and making use of this blue ribbon committee that we're talking about to help guide the implementation and really being the key force behind developing support for that dedicated funding that TBARTA needs to make Envision 2030 become a reality. And then next slide. Now we talked about this in a previous presentation. There are values that TBARTA offers today in what they're able to do with the limited resources they have today. But these are the values on this slide that we need to be working toward with Envision 2030. If we're able to fund the high priority or high impact scenario, then we put ourselves in a position to help stimulate economic development, to increase access to jobs throughout the region, and make Tampa Bay more competitive as a region than we've been able to be in the past. The bottom line is putting together and providing mobility options that will improve quality of life to residents, visitors, commuters, everybody in the Tampa Bay area. Next slide. Well, we presented to the technical advisory group yesterday, the Transit Management Committee, and they did endorse the plan as is presented yesterday. We're looking for that today from the CAC. There is, of course, the board meeting date has been changed now to the 24th. So we'll be presenting the draft to the board a week from Friday for their consideration. At that point, we're basically asking them to open up a public comment period that will go for some time after that board meeting. Yet to be determined whether we're going to present the final for adoption, perhaps in May, but it may, if they decide to meet again in June, we may slip that to June to have more time for public comment. We'll also be working to present to both PSTA and HART boards and the county commissions and the legislative delegation. We need to share with them by July 1st. We need to submit to the legislative delegation by July 1st, according to the TBARTA Florida statute. So with that, this is a summary of the executive summary and the draft report, and certainly we're glad to take any comments or questions that you might have today.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Roberts, I have a question.
You're recognized, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you. Bill, thanks for that great summary and for the slides. They're very informative. I had a couple of comments or questions. One suggestion is that you add to your list of bodies to whom you may want to present this, being the MPO boards of the various counties. They will probably refer them or ask for comment from their Citizens Advisory Committee, which I think would broaden your base of support, and you might get some interesting comments back from them. I suspect Rob Cirque and Pasco would agree.
Yeah, and in fact, if I might answer that one first.
Sure.
We have done some of those updates along the way as we develop the plan. So I think the plan is certainly to go back once we have a complete plan is to give a final update as well. So I know we presented to committees for Hillsborough. We did not present to the board yet. We did present to the Hernando Citrus MPO board. We did sit down with county commissioners in Manatee. So we've had presentations to some of them, but not all of them. And we need to go back once we have the final plan.
Good, good, thanks. You're talking about funding, and you mentioned the need for the local match for the block grants. I'm just curious, is there a formula for that? Is that a straight 10%, or how is that local funding amount derived?
Sure. And basically what it is, there is a formula at the state level to determine how much comes from the state. And it looks at population, it looks at ridership, and it looks at number of miles provided of service. So that determines the amount. And then the locals need to match that dollar for dollar. So if we were to get 100,000 from the state, we need to come up with 100,000 to match it. And that's how we developed the plan. We estimate how much is coming from the state, and then we need the same amount from the locals to match that.
Okay, so it's a 1-for-1 match.
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's all I have for now. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Rob?
Rob Cirque?
Yes.
Yes, I was just kind of follow up to Bill's comment. So yeah, I think the presenting to the CAC boards around as well as the MPOs would definitely be a wise decision to schedule that. And if, of course, anything I can do to help, I'd be happy to help that make that happen. So that's all I got.
Are there others? I had a couple, if I can recognize myself. In going through the long-term versus short-term priorities, I think that was page 17 and page 16. Is the long-term priority still within 10 years?
No, only some of them were. Those are the top priorities that came out on the list, but we had to use some judgment as to what was reasonable to accomplish in the first 10 years. So you will see that what we included in the high impact scenario was the first phase of regional rapid transit, and then 6 new express bus routes. So that was the extent of the long-term projects that we included, along with some capital investment that goes with those.
Yeah, coming from Clearwater, there's been a lot of talk about the Clearwater Beach to Tampa. And I was wondering, it's at the bottom of the list. Does that mean that you're looking at in the 9th year, or that's gotten a lot of attention? So I'm wondering how that fits in.
Elizabeth is on the call as well. Do you have the timing of when that one is assumed to occur, Liz?
We assume for the financial plan purposes that all the express bus routes would come online at the same time. And I believe we assume 2024 because that would allow the state block grant funds that TBARTA should be receiving based on their existing commuter services to kick in and help fund, along with the required local match, to help fund those routes. So we did not prioritize them in terms of starting in different years.
Okay. Thank you. The next question is on slide 29. This is really kind of the whys of that we're doing this. And I've wondered a little bit about the terms improve the quality of life. And I'm wondering if a better term would be improving life experiences. When I went through this, and then I also went through the actual executive summary, and it seemed like we're doing a great job of explaining what we're being proposed, but not so much in the why we're trying to do it. And I'd be interested in having some thoughts or comments from the rest of the committee on that as well.
Well, I can start with a quick response. Is I think that's a good suggestion, and I think we would have the time to strengthen the why as we make that draft report become a final before adoption. So I'm happy to take the thoughts from the committee and how we can strengthen that discussion. Sure.
Other thoughts from the committee members on that? Not hearing anything. I would just say that we're going to be asking for a lot of money.
Hey,
from
Bill,
the, yeah,
I think Bob Widner, I'm sorry, and Leonardo have raised their hands. If you want to recognize either one of them, I will unmute their mics.
sure, go ahead. Why don't you do them in your order you saw it?
We'll do who was there? Was it
I defer to Bob.
Bob, please go ahead. Gonna try to unmute you again. Try now, Bob. Hey, Bob Widmer, I think you're open.
Okay, I didn't know. It's a little hard to figure out what you're talking about. I just have some comments on the executive summary. And Bill, I thought that does a great job because it does recognize the regional competitive report, which is I think a big input into the whole planning in the Tampa area, as well as the peer regional assessment of 6 others. It shows that you're not operating in a vacuum, that you've got a well-founded basis for your analysis and where you're going. And I particularly like the fact that CSX is mentioned 3 times, specifically on page 15, and that rail is mentioned, I believe, 9 times, again on page 15, 19, and 26. So I think those add a lot of credibility and substance to your report in the executive summary. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We also have Leonardo who would like to make a comment. Leonardo, I'm going to unmute you now, and you should be open and be able to talk.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair, and thank you, Bill, for the presentation. I think there's a lot of information that you've distilled very well and concisely, which is a real challenge. My question is really about, and I may have missed this, so I apologize, but can you elaborate a bit on how closely you're working with and maybe the Envision plan addresses local transit agencies, both in terms of communication, but also in terms of the actual transit options that are being discussed and plans that are kind of in motion? Because I think at the very outset, you said it yourself that Envision 2030 is really focused on the commuter's experience. And I think that that's really key. And I go back a couple of months to one of our previous meetings where, we were talking about the BRT Express on 275, starting in Wesley Chapel, going through Hillsborough all the way down to Pinellas. And, one of the discussions we had was, well, don't a lot of the stops along our proposed, the BRT route overlap a bit much with, the proposed Florida Avenue BRT project. So, that's an example of what I'm referring to. So thank you.
Yeah, I will start by saying that from the beginning, we've been coordinating closely with each of the transit operators. In fact, early on, we met with the senior planning staff or the directors from each of the transit agencies to make sure we got their input right up front of what their latest transit development plans were, so that we weren't going to be in conflict with what they were already planning, and then bringing those together and then adding to that the public input and our technical analysis on top of it. So to respond to your one example, I'm not sure if this was discussed at the meeting you're talking about, but to understand the difference between the I-275 BRT, Regional Rapid Transit, and the Florida Avenue BRT. Fortunately, we are also the firm that's leading the effort on the Florida Avenue BRT. But the bottom line is those are 2 very different markets. So if you're talking about a longer distance commute trip on I-275 versus a short to mid distance trip on the Florida Avenue BRT, and they really complement each other very well. For example, if you wanted to get to downtown St. Pete to go to work, you could take that Florida Avenue BRT to the station that is shared with the regional rapid transit and then go straight to downtown St. Petersburg. So it's not intended to duplicate any services because the station spacing is much greater on the I-275 project and a bit closer on the Florida Avenue BRT, serving different types of trips. I don't know if that answers your question, Leonardo, if you want to expand on what I've said.
No, I think it certainly addresses my question. You know, I guess I'm just coming from, again, that meeting, you know, it was probably 2 or 3 meetings ago. So we're looking at, you know, 6 months ago now. But the presentation was, you know, I think it had, you know, 6 stops or maybe 5 stops perhaps on, you know, regional rapid transit. I want to use the right nomenclature here, the 275 project. And I think it had 5 or 6 stops just in Hillsborough before even getting to West Shore. So I think, you know, the argument that, or the discussion that was had then was, well, that seems a bit much for a regional transit project. And the response from the presenter was, well, in order to make this project feasible, this is the amount of stops that you need to have. To which, you know, my reaction was similar to what you were saying. You have the Florida Avenue transit project, and the intermodal stations are going to be key. So as long as these projects are in harmony and keep the commuter in mind, you know, that's what I'm really after here. I just want the transit system to make sense for the commuter, because at the end, you know, there's the question of branding, right, which is, I think, very valid. But at the end of the day, the commuter just needs to know how to get from A to B.
Well, I can say the bottom line and the intention of TBARTA is for these services to complement each other and reinforce the markets they're serving. So certainly as the regional rapid transit project moves forward, that's certainly the intent, is for us to identify that at a higher level in Envision 2030, and then for those 2 individual studies to coordinate as they go forward.
Excellent, thank you.
Are there other questions? Can I raise another question? I think when you gave this presentation to us earlier, maybe it was October, maybe it was December, we talked about the need to include the transportation disadvantaged and ride sharing in the portfolio of the entire project. And was there a decision to not include that, or was there just kind of trying to close the loop on that one?
Sure, that's a good comment. It's definitely covered in the full report and probably not magnified in the executive summary. It is mentioned in the executive summary, but maybe not to the extent that you would have expected. And that's something we could also make sure we emphasize in the final version, is something more specific related to commuter services and van pooling in our call to action and recommendations. We could highlight that more directly in the executive summary if you think that's appropriate.
Well, I know I personally do. The TD, we have good TD within the county, but we don't have TD going across counties. So that means that we've got a right. Hole.
The only caveat I'll say on the regional transportation disadvantage is that we don't have a good feel for the level of demand for regional TD service. So what we had included, and it's in the executive summary and the full report, is a more detailed look at what that demand is before we talk about making investments in providing a service for the region and getting a better feel for that demand. So it's in there as a way of needing to be looked at more closely before we go out and implement expanded TD service at the regional level.
Yeah, Bill, I looked at the full report and I did see a reference to transportation disadvantage on page 2-35, but that was And then there was a little bit in the goals and objectives on 10.1, but those were the only two references I saw to it.
Well, we can take a look at making that more prominent, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Likewise with the commuter services and van pool services, I think we did add a more significant section in the full report, but we could probably have a more substantial recommendation in the call to action.
At least point me to them. So
Liz, do you have the full report in front of you as to what section that we integrated the commuter services plan?
That I don't have it in front of me, but that would be the financial plan, section 11, before the call to action.
Now, we had coordinated with Cutter on the additional work that they're doing on the commuter. Maybe Cindy, you can elaborate on what Cutter's doing for them.
Sure. So Cutter's working on sorry, this is Cindy Raskin with TBARTA. I'm the Director of Commuter Services. Cutter is working on a regional TDM plan. They were contracted by FDOT to do. So they're looking at how, as a region, aside from just the work, I say just kind of tongue in cheek, just the work that TBARTA is doing, how TDM practices can be rolled out in other ways and in other interactions throughout the transportation system in District 7. So they're still working on that project. But things like, safer streets and pedestrian and bicycling facilities, supportive van pools, carpools, specialized parking, teleworking, all of those sorts of things.
And Mr. Chair, my recollection is that we took a summary of what was being accomplished in that effort and integrated in the Envision 2030 plan. And I don't have the exact page number that is right now, but we can certainly provide that to you later.
Yeah, I did find on 11-4 a reference to it, but I didn't go back into the actual, all the appendices. So maybe missed that. But to me, those two things are such a secret resource within TBARTA that I think we can get some additional support from the community for making sure that we include them in both the why and the how we do that. So that was my my major questions. Are there other questions from the rest of the group?
Bill Roberts is asking for recognition.
Okay, Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I kind of want to address this to Bill Ball, and I apologize if this particular item is covered in the report and I missed it, but obviously one of the ways to build support for the entire TBARTA plan and the TBARTA entity itself is to put up forth to the community a method of coordinating all of the interconnection between the local services and the regional services, and between PSTA, HART, and other Manatee, Sarasota, and Pasco counties. Those entities, those transportation groups are working on their own plans. So if you don't have it in here, I would encourage you to stress the point that TBARTA would continue to make an effort to coordinate the interconnectivity of all of those different transportation modes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we've sufficiently highlighted that the way you describe it, but certainly the Transit Management Committee of TBARTA is intended to serve in that role. So we can certainly point that out, that part of their role is to coordinate local and regional services when they meet periodically for TBARTA's purposes as well.
Well, and we hear it a lot in Hillsborough, and I suspect that it also surfaces in other counties, is that if we have a regional plan, how does one get from home to the regional connectivity to their ultimate destination in a different county? So I think not only will the public be interested in it, but certainly all of our committees will be interested in it.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. I think that was an excellent point. Other questions, comments?
Bill, one item, I don't believe we've called for public comment in the meeting yet, and I just wanted to make you aware of that in case you wanted to do that prior to any vote.
Oh, thank you. I think we should ask, do we have public comment?
Thank you, Cindy from TBARTA. I'm managing the phone line that's been set up for public comment. We do not have anybody on the line wishing to make public comment at this time. Thank you.
Did we get anything emailed to us in advance?
We did not.
Okay. So the question for the group is, do we want to go forward with a recommendation to the board on the plan that has been presented to us? I'm kind of looking for a motion or some further thoughts on that.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Roberts, I have just a comment, not necessarily a motion, if I may.
Go for it.
I've kind of lost track of where this recommendation is going. So Bill, could you kind of walk us through what happens after this committee approves it and then it goes to the TBARTA board, and then what happens to it?
Absolutely. Basically, we are looking for both committees to endorse what we're presenting as a draft to the TBARTA board on the 24th of April. And only on the 24th would we open a public comment period where we haven't defined how long that is yet because we don't know when the final presentation will be, but there'll be another period following that meeting on the 24th to obtain public comment that we consider for integration before we take the final plan back to the board for adoption. So there is still time between the meeting on the 24th where we present the draft to the board and then to impact the plan that's ultimately adopted by the board in May or June.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I think I heard you say that the full plan needs to be presented to the legislature in July.
We have to submit a document by July 1st. We'll likely be following up with any meetings that they require after July 1st, but they need the document in hand by July 1st.
Okay.
Bill, Karen Mullins would like recognition.
Yes, Karen.
Oh, let me unmute you, Karen. Hold on one second. I'm having trouble unmuting you.
I think I got it. Okay. Thank you, Bill, for recognizing me. I'd like to make a motion. Is that okay with you, Bill?
Absolutely. Let's see what it is.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the endorsement of the Envision 2030 Executive Summary and Draft Final Report, with the caveat that we are going to follow up on the transportation disadvantage and rideshare.
Okay, your motion was to accept the executive summary and the draft report and make recommendation to the board to accept it with the caveat that the transportation disadvantaged content would be expanded further. Did I get that right?
That's correct. That's correct. Thank you, Bill.
Would you consider the point that I mentioned earlier about trying to talk more about the whys, what we're going, why we're taking this journey, to include how it would benefit the ultimate user? The suggestion I made was, instead of quality of life, improve the life experiences or the something to that extent.
Rob Sue is asking for recognition.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just like all of the ideas that came out, I think are important to address in some way. You mentioned the TD, you mentioned the why. Bill Roberts mentioned being more informative on working with all of the transportation groups and coordination. So, and I think all of those need to be addressed. So how do we motion to move forward addressing those, or is that necessary?
I might answer one of those questions, Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Bill.
This is Bill Ball again. Regarding the coordination with the local governments and the MPOs and I think that's already there and really, really strongly stated under the call to action related to coordination and collaboration. So I think that's there. It's just a matter of making sure we follow up on that at this point. But the other items that you mentioned, I think we're very comfortable with strengthening between the draft and the final version.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Chair, I agree to your amendment.
All right. So that would be the transportation disadvantaged, the coordination between the local and the regional, the expansion of the benefits to the users of the system, and perhaps the people that wouldn't be using it, but the benefits that they would get from congestion reduction. Are there any other elements? If not, I think we go to Jennifer, or if there's no other discussion, then we can go to Jennifer for a calling of the roll on the motion as amended.
No one second.
Nobody, yeah, we need a second.
Rob, you here, I'll second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. All right, is there further discussion on the motion as amended? All right, Jennifer, would you call the roll?
Yep. Bob Henyon. Can you hear us, Bob?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Bill Roberts.
Yes.
Bob Widmer.
Yes.
Richard Balcom.
Yes.
Leonardo.
I don't see him in the meeting right now.
Okay. Bill Johnson.
Yes.
Rob Seacrew.
Yes.
Karen Mullins.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes 8-0.
Thank you very much. Bill
Thank you,
Ball,
everyone.
I'd just like to thank you for your extensive, considerable efforts over, seems like years and years on this. Thank you for allowing us to participate in the development and the understanding of it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the good discussion that you've had over the course of the last year. So it's been really important input to the plan.
Okay. Chris Dianantes, do you have anything else that you would comment on before we move on to the next subject?
I do not.
Okay, great. Well, we can move on to the next presentation, which was Commute Tampa Bay, and by our distinguished Director of Commuter Services, Cindy Raskin.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon again, everybody. My name's Cindy Raskin. I'm the Director of Commuter Services for TBARTA. I've been with TBARTA a little over a year now, and we've done a lot of work towards relaunching and kind of building this program from scratch There wasn't a lot of work being done out in the community with this program. So we've had the opportunity to, as you know, bring in staff. We've got folks assigned by region now. We have 3 account executives, and we have 1 program specialist who handles our database and our customer service. So today I want to talk to you just a little overview about our new branding that we have rolled out and some of the services that we're offering with that. Chris, do you have the slides for that? Chris, you're muted. I can see you saying yes. You have the slides.
I don't have slides for that. If you sent them to me, I can go find them, but I don't recall getting those.
Okay, they're on the website. Is it possible to let me share my screen?
Why don't you talk for a minute? Let me see what I can find. Which slides are these? Or direct me to these, and I'll find them.
It's on the meeting. If you go to the meeting section under the drop down for today, it's a PowerPoint.
All right, give me a minute to find those, and I'll call those up if you could. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just talk some more while you bring those up. One of the things that we really wanted to do in this past year, as I said, shore up the program, get it to a place where people are starting to hear about TBARTA and the services that we're providing. If you have an opportunity, I would invite you to go out and poke around the TBARTA website. We have a page in there called Commute Tampa Bay. And within that page, you can find more detailed information about all of the services we provide. And I especially like to point out a page there that's called Commute Friendly Partners. You can go and see all the businesses that our account executives have been working with. We've got them categorized into different levels depending on what level of commitment they have given us towards working for commuter services. So there's over 50 companies on there that some of them you will have heard of, some of them you will not. We've got some big ones coming up. Our team is working with Baycare. They're working with Verizon. There you go. Look at that. There's my slides.
Just direct me on which slides you want to go to.
Sure. Just go on down to the, go down to 2. There you go. So we'll start there. Our team, you know, the team of account executives that I mentioned go out and work with employers, mostly, sometimes directly with commuters, but mostly with employers to help them put together commute alternative programs for their employees. We help them find a better way to get to work other than driving by themselves. The really great thing about this program is we don't go in with a cookie cutter kind of view. We go in, we talk with the company, we find out what are their particular commute challenges. Do they have parking challenges? Do they have good public transit near them? And then our group puts together a commuter plan for them that's specific and detailed for their business to make sure we get the right mix of opportunities for them. Next slide, please. So you all are, you know, transit and commute alternative advocates. So I probably don't have to go too far into why using a commute alternative is a good idea. We know it lowers emissions and traffic congestion. We know that offering transit benefits and other transportation commute alternative benefits is a great recruitment and retention tool. And employers can, you know, lower their payroll taxes when they offer a benefit or allow their employees to pay for transportation from pre-tax dollars. Next slide, please. So earlier this year, we started working on a new branding effort. The platform we were using before for Help People Ride Match was very old and kind of clunky. It was not modern. So we had gone out to bid to select a new vendor. And we felt like it was the perfect opportunity to go ahead and talk about rebranding the collection of programs that we offer for our commuters. And we were able to incorporate that branding into the new platform so that the timing was really perfect for it. Next slide, please. So Commute Tampa Bay is the new brand. We did a lot of, we did some market research, we did surveys, we did tons of brainstorming. I have photographs of the whiteboard in my office that's just filled with, you know, we looked at what kind of words did we want to include in this new brand. So basically we came down to TBARTA Commute Tampa Bay. It says who we are, what we do, and where we do it. We use the same colors as the TBARTA logo to to make sure there was continuity there. And we feel like this brand, when we've seen it out places, it's very attractive and attention getting. So that's the brand itself. Part of that, as I mentioned, is the new app. Thank you, Chris. You can download it on the Google Play Store or the App Store, or you can create an account on the web if you don't have or don't want to use a mobile app. It allows you to create an account and create your own profile where you put in there what kind of commuting you do, if you already carpool, if you already ride transit, all of those things. And it gives you the opportunity to find carpool matches, vanpool matches, even bicycle partner matches. Next slide, please. So within the app, you can find matches. So that first little image there, I just did a search from St. Pete to Ybor City. You can see there's a couple of matches in there. The little purple circle is bicycle facilities. So this app also has the bike locations and then park and ride locations. So you could find matches in there. Let's stay there for a sec. The second little image in there, you can see your own dashboard for when you're doing your alternative transportation trips and you log those in our app. It'll show you what the impact is that your particular commute is making on our community. And then the third one there, you can just see an example of what it asks you. Are you doing a round trip? What's the date? How far? It knows how far you're going because you're putting in a starting and ending location. All right, next slide, please. Really cool thing about this app, my very favorite part about the whole thing is that this app will reward you for doing things that help our community. So if you are carpooling, if you're vanpooling, you're riding public transit, walking, biking, telecommuting, you can go in and log your trip and you earn points based upon those trips. So today I logged my telework trip since I'm working from home and I earned 200 points. So this is week 5 for me. So by the end of this week, I will have earned 5,000 points just for working from home, which I was doing already anyway. And then I can go and redeem those points. The example you can see here is $5 off a pizza at Jet's Pizza, and it just cost me 500 points. The other thing we're doing now is incorporating the Emergency Ride Home program into this app. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. The Emergency Ride Home program, we have changed also with the launch of the new app. We have done 2 big things here. We've increased from 4 rides per year to 6 rides per year, understanding that 4 might not be enough for a commuter if they get stuck at work. We really want them to try these commute alternatives and have a good kind of like insurance system there for them so they can get home in case of an emergency. The other really big thing we did was change from a voucher to a reimbursement model. Now the voucher was an old 3-part form. It had a number imprinted on it and you had to get your supervisor to sign it. And you were limited to the 1 or 2 taxi companies that we had an agreement with that would accept the voucher. So now what you can do is redeem 0, it doesn't cost you any points, it's 0 points, but you redeem through the app to get reimbursed for your trip up to $100. Now, the really great thing about this is it has that check and balance where people have to have been using the app and have to have been logging their trips so that we know that they're really commuting by a commute alternative. So far, this program has been really great. And we've had a lot of people, I just got a report not long ago where we've had something like 50 people download the reimbursement form already. We haven't got that many reimbursement requests yet, but they'll be coming. So that's a really great option. So people can choose their own provider instead of having to choose ours. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just quickly to run through the services that we do provide, the ride matching system can help people find a carpool partner. The carpool partners themselves actually work out any kind of arrangement, such as where they'll meet, where they'll go, if they're going to exchange any money for gas or whatever, pick up, drop off, all of those sorts of things. An employer can choose to subsidize carpooling up to $270 per month per employee. So that, would end up reducing payroll taxes and things like that. And subsidizing carpooling could qualify them for best workplaces for commuters, which I'll talk about in a bit. Next slide, please. Okay, vanpool. Vanpools are great for groups of employees, 5 to 15 employees that live near each other within a couple miles of each other and have the same work destination. We partner with Commute by Enterprise, who provides the vehicles for the leasing, and they operate that whole functional operational side of that program. We subsidize the first $400 per month, and then the rest of the cost of that van pool is split between the people using it. And the cost that they pay to Enterprise includes gas, maintenance, tolls, everything else. And an employer can choose to subsidize up to $270 a month for that program also. Right now, the van pooling program, we're looking at working together with Manatee County to help support them in their commute program. They're in a different DOT district, but because they're in TBARTA's district, we're going to be working with them to help them with some van pools until they get their own program set up. That's pretty great program. As of, well, before the COVID-19 thing, we were up to 172 vans. Next slide, please. One of the really great things that we have found is the opportunity to co-brand with our partners. So if you were to start a carpool program at your business or a van pool program at your business, TBARTA can provide a sign that looks like this. It says reserved for carpool or van pool. We could change up that language if somebody wants separate spaces for carpool, van pool, whatever. We've designed the signs and we have them printed on demand, because you can see on the left-hand side there where it's got that yellow circle, it just says your logo. So we could put the partner's logo on there. And then there's a phone number at the bottom where people can call to learn how they also could qualify to get reserved parking at their businesses. Next slide, please. Okay, so right now during COVID-19, this particular slide is super relevant as far as telecommuting and staggered work schedules go. Any kind of alternative work schedule arrangement is something that we can help a business put together. Right now, we are working on supporting teleworking a lot. In fact, I'll use this opportunity to plug our webinar series. We are co-sponsoring a webinar series with our peers in the other our contiguous FDOT districts. And our first one's going to be Friday this week at noon. And then the following 2 Fridays, we're going to have additional ones. They're all talking about teleworking, the technologies of teleworking culture, things like that. So if anyone's interested, if you go to commutetampabay.com and scroll down a little bit, there's a link there that you can register. The seating is limited. As of this morning, we were about half sold out. It's free, but sold out. Okay, next slide, please. So of course, public transit, we know is an important piece of the mix, especially where you have a business that has good public transit service. We've had the opportunity to build great partnerships with the outreach folks and transportation folks at our neighboring public transit agencies. So we work with them to help make sure people are getting the right bus information and bring them in to meetings when it makes sense for businesses that have good transit service, so they can offer that to their employees as well. And employers can subsidize the cost of a public transit pass up to $270 per employee per month. Okay, next one. Bicycling. Bicycling and walking, are programs that a lot of people would like to take advantage of. Some places have better trail systems and have safer roads than others throughout our area here, but we do help businesses put together bicycle programs. For commuters, it's especially useful if there's secure covered bicycle parking so that your bicycle is safe and doesn't get poured on in the summer. And then things like having showers and locker rooms available so employees can change when they get to work is a huge benefit. So part of our ride matching system does have the opportunity for bicycle ride matching, so you can find a bike partner to ride with. Next slide, please. All right, and so the biggest part of what we offer, you can see this picture here, that's me and my team. The biggest thing we offer is the free employer support. So we'll come in, I'm not gonna read you this whole bullet list. You can go and check it out on our website, the whole list of the services that we offer. But basically we go in and we try to make it as painless as possible. We try to really make it turnkey so we can help them set up as much or as little as they want to do. The Best Workplaces for Commuters program that I mentioned earlier, a lot of times we'll go into a business specifically because we know they're really close to qualifying for that program. What that program does is national recognition for businesses that have good workplace for commuter programs where they offer a a primary benefit such as subsidizing bus passes or subsidizing van programs or a super robust telework program. And then they also provide a number of supporting programs such as an emergency ride home program, which we offer, literature available to their employees, again, which we offer. So we help them go in and get qualified for those programs. There's the Best Workplaces for Commuters page also on our website, and you can see the 2020 list of businesses in the Tampa Bay area that qualified for that designation. All right, next slide. Oh, and that was it. So that's the presentation. Right now, like I said, we're really focusing on trying to help people with teleworking because it's super relevant and trying to learn all we can. So that webinar we're going to have Friday, if you know of anybody who could benefit from that, please invite them to sign up. I'm happy to take any questions.
Cindy, this is Bill Johnson. Just a question on the telework. The Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council used to have a telework program. Do they still have that, or are you working with them?
They used to have a program called Telework Tampa Bay. It was funded for only a short period of time. When I came on board, the website had expired. It hadn't been kept up in a number of years. So we are looking at going back through all of the resources that were provided on there and seeing which ones we can pull out and update to today's relevancy and sharing those with our partners.
You're already ahead of me. Thank you.
Bob Widmer would like recognition, and Karen after Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Cindy, thank you very much. A very, very nice presentation. I think the branding that you did certainly consolidates a lot of the value add that TBARTA is adding to the community. I do want to tell you, though, I went out to tbarta.com, and on the first page, you do see Commute Tampa Bay, but it's not linkable. So the only way I could get to your homepage was to go up into the search box and put in Commute Tampa Bay, and then I got to your homepage. Now, I don't know if that was my laptop that wasn't doing it, but I would expect from the first page on tampabay.com to be able to immediately click into Commute Tampa Bay. And then once I got into Commute Tampa Bay, I saw that there were statistics for the van pool, but there were no statistics for any of the other services. And I might like to know, okay, how many carpools? What's the ridership again? How much is being saved there? Or the emergency rides? How many, some of the statistics there. Those are my two comments relative to the website.
Sure. If I could just reply, Mr. Chair. Bob, when you go to that website, you should be able to hover over where it says Commute Tampa Bay, and in the drop-down list, you can click on all the different pages underneath. So the first one I think is a COVID-19 statement, and then the next one down says Commute Tampa Bay, which is a summary, and then carpool, van pool. I'm happy to help you offline with that if you can't see it right away. As far as the statistics, yes, I agree. The Agile Mile system that I mentioned, the new app, we just got our first month's statistics from that. And so the plan with that statistics space is to provide updates on a regular basis to it. We're still kind of working out the reporting kinks between the old system we had and the new system we had. So definitely watch for that in the next couple of weeks. It's a place that we are working on getting the updated statistics for it.
Thank you. Excellent job.
Thank you.
Karen?
Okay, Karen Mullins. Thank you,
Hi,
Chair. Hi, Cindy. Listen, there are a couple of, I want to say the Tampa Downtown Partnership. Is that a nonprofit?
They're a transportation management agency that specializes and focuses on downtown issues, parking, and they do transportation demand management also, very specific to the downtown area.
Okay, so they're coming up in one of the best workplaces for commuters. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if there's any way we can work with the CRAs in our communities. These are areas that we're trying to shore up.
Mhm.
And I know the Dunedin has a few, has a CRA, is working on a second CRA. But the downtown area has an association that may be able to plug into this. Is this something we can do?
Yeah, I could definitely look at that. I hadn't specifically thought about targeting CRAs, but that's a good idea.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments?
Could I
Yeah,
add
Bill.
just one more thing, Bill? I just wanted to mention, I forgot, sorry, it's because of my my work at home brain is not necessarily working at the moment, but Chris Jaddick and I had put together a marketing advertising campaign once we launched this new brand. It was a combination of radio ads and TV ads and some paid social media. And that was going along really great. We had lots of anecdotal responses before we had even gotten our first statistical report. People were hearing the ad and seeing the ad, and basically it was like, try a carpool, try a van pool, call us and we can help you. We have put those ads on hold right now because all the language was carpool and van pool, and we didn't think it was a good idea to be encouraging people to ride in cars together. So that campaign's on hold. When we get to the other side of it, as soon as Chris feels like the timing is right, we'll start that campaign right back up where we left off. And so you'll be hearing that on the radio and seeing it on, well, I think Fox 13 is the news station.
So have our van pools been suspended, or are people just wearing masks as they ride? It's less than 10 people in a vehicle.
Yeah, that's a great question. So we've been having lots of conversations with Enterprise about how they want to handle that. Most of our van pools right now, most of the passengers are federal government employees. So MacDill Air Force Base, Bay Pines VA, James A. Haley VA, et cetera. And a lot of them, they're handling it differently. Some of the VAs have decided they're going to continue to pay their employees their subsidy. Some of them have not. So what we've worked out with Enterprise right now, as long as if somebody in the van pool needs to use the van because it's their only way to get to and from work, then we'll continue to subsidize as long as that's a work van. And then as for the others, if they need to have more than one person in the vehicle for whatever reason, we're asking them to be very specific about who would be in the van, why they needed to share the ride, and what their plan is for how they're going to tackle the social distancing requirements. So far, our partners at Enterprise are still reaching out. We have, with our 172 vans, we have almost 1,000 riders. So it's taking them a little bit of time to reach out to every single one of them and to make sure that we are complying, but also still understanding that some of these van pool coordinators or van pool riders might not have another form of transportation to get to and from work.
Okay. Other questions?
Bob Widmer's asking for recognition.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just one follow-up for Cindy. I also liked your best workplace for commuters. The little award that you have, I guess the award program, and you do list the companies that received this award. I think it would be nice, though, that those companies have a link to their website so that people looking to work for them or something else like that might not have to do that themselves, but immediately could go to those sites. Thank you.
Yeah, I know that the ones that we have on our partner page are linked. I thought the best places for commuter ones were too, but we'll go, and I think that's a good call. Yeah, you're right. They're not linked on here. We have all the links. I can go in and add all those.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you very much, Cindy.
Karen Mullins is asking for recognition.
Okay. Karen.
Okay, Cindy, what kind of tax incentives are there to employers to use van pool?
Once upon a time, a few years ago, employers used to be able to write off the cost of their public transit subsidy or their commute subsidy as a business expense. I think it was in 2017, the feds changed that. So that's not an opportunity anymore. However, any of these financial incentives that they provide their employee that are done as a pre-tax, say for example, you get your $85 passport that lets you ride PSTA and HART, and they do that as a pre-tax benefit, that lowers the employee's taxable income and therefore lowers the taxes the employee pays on that income and lowers their payroll taxes. So it's not a huge amount of money, but there's a little bit of incentive there.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
All right. So again, thank you, Cindy.
Absolutely.
Next agenda item is new business and committee discussion. I'd like to start this out by asking Chris Chaddick to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 and the impact on how the transit agencies are adapting to this situation right now. I think that might be useful for us to have in case other people ask us questions.
Thank you, Bill. I have been in touch with the various agencies in our 5-county area, and so I'm going to be very brief here because much of this you've probably already seen in the news. But as you know, all the bus agencies in our area, the local transit agencies, have cut back on their service hours. Certainly there's been a decrease in demand, but they are also an essential service for those who do need to get to those essential jobs or may need to get to the doctor. So to keep public transit working in this time is a requirement. To make it there when people need it is a requirement. The agencies want to step up, but at the same time, demand certainly is low. And so they've been making some changes on that. The passengers on all agencies are being encouraged to stagger their seating to meet the social distancing guidelines. And of course, additional cleaning and sanitation procedures have been stepped up at all of our agencies. All the local transit agencies, with the exception of HART, have gone fare free and are asking transit riders to board from the rear doors. That obviously eliminates any possible contact you have up at the fare box, the front door by the driver. HART does emphasize that they have the plastic shields up on all of their fixed routes that provide a barrier between the driver and the passenger coming on board. And this is obviously for mutual protection of both the driver and the people who they serve as well too. So at this point, 4 of the 5 transit agencies in our area are fare free, asking people to board from the rear. HART is still on regular fare service, but also stepping up their sanitation, their cleaning procedures. You probably saw in the news, I think it was just yesterday, a HART employee did test positive for COVID-19. All the staff that might have been in contact with that person, I understand, has been notified within 24 hours. And so HART is taking action on that. It just goes to show that, you know, our transit workers are in the line of fire. And I think they're to be commended. When I've had the opportunity to speak to the media about that, I've always made a note that our transit employees are stepping up. They can't work from home. They've got to be out there to provide this very vital service. And so we certainly commend all of them as they struggle with decreased revenue and still a need to provide that transit service in our area for those who need it most.
Thank you. Are there general comments from the group?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Roberts has a question.
Yeah. You're recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to ask if there is someone on the line that could provide a legislative report now that the legislative session is over and what the status of the state funding is for TBARTA in general.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is David.
Oh, you were sitting here in the background. Thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely. I can handle that question if you'd like.
Okay, please do.
Yes. So TBARTA, we had 2 items that were working through the legislature on parallel tracks. One related to funding, and the second related to some language changes that we were requesting to the statute. Both things seem to be sailing through the legislature without any issues up until the 11th hour, at which time I was contacted and notified that there were some issues in Tallahassee, not necessarily with TBARTA or transportation, but with some completely unrelated things. And there were several requests that were struck at that particular time, and TBARTA was one of them. So it wasn't related to funding, but it did relate to the language changes that we were requesting. So the language changes were not approved. However, we were able to preserve the funding that we requested. We were a line item that was included in the budget that the legislature approved. However, that budget has not been submitted to the governor yet. They are holding on to it at this point. I'm told that the governor may receive it, if not by the end of April, maybe sometime in May, at which point he has, I believe, 10 days to sign it and put it in place. All that being said, everybody is aware of the impacts that the localities and the state are dealing with related to tax revenues. So whatever the budget is that's signed by the governor will most likely be very different when July 1st comes around. And I guess that there's a good chance that the legislature may actually need to reconvene later this summer to discuss the budget specifically. In any event, the funding that we received was in the form of an earmark. They're not general funds. Fortunately, because if we were included in the budget as a general fund line item, that money, for all intents and purposes, would never be seen by TBARTA. That would completely go away. The earmark that we received is in the Transportation Trust Fund. So that actually is a good thing. There is a good chance that those funds will remain in place for the next fiscal year, but it's just a little premature to know specifically if they're going to come through at this point in time.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, David.
Yes, thank you, David. Is there anything else that you would like to comment on since we have you with us?
I would also like to echo your comments to Bill Ball and to Elizabeth and the TBARTA staff that worked on Envision 2030. It's hard to believe that we're at the end of this effort. We awarded a contract to Tyndale Oliver. I believe it was in January of 2019. And time has really flown by. I am happy to be at the end of this, though, and to be at the point where we can present the final plan to the board and ask for their adoption at the following meeting. I would also like to thank you all for your very thoughtful comments and discussion on Envision 2030 throughout the course of this time. It is very obvious that you all took the time to actually, read the report and read the executive summary. And I just want to extend my thanks to you all for that.
Well, that's what we're here for. So please, I think we've offered in the past to help you with legislative lobbying or legislative liaison too, but so that's we're all very committed to the improving transit in the Tampa Bay area, so that's great. Is there any other new business that anyone on the committee would like to bring up? The next item is just simply to review the items to report to the TBARTA board, and that will include the recommendation to adopt the executive summary and the detailed report with comments asking for enhancements in the areas that we discussed transportation disadvantage, the whys, the regional coordination, and the van pool. I think those were the items that we added in. Did I miss anything? Then that would be in our report to the board. Is there any comments about the process that we used today? Are you comfortable with it? Are there suggestions that could make it even better? Using the Zoom meetings, are you speak now or forever hold your peace?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Bob Whitmore, I thought it was fantastic. It's the first time I've ever used Zoom.
Yeah. I'm amazed how much more communication occurs when you can see somebody's face.
Yes.
Chair, I just wanted to share a little Zoom tip that I learned. So like right now, Chris has everyone's microphones muted, but if you hold down your space bar, it temporarily unmutes you. And then as soon as you let go of your space bar, it puts you back on mute. So instead of having to search around for your mute, unmute, that works in Zoom anyway.
Okay. Thank you. We had Alan Zimmett, our attorney, on the line. I don't know if he...
Bill, I know that, yeah, and Karen was asking for recognition as well. And I think Alan is.
Alan?
Yeah. Go ahead, Alan.
Let's do Alan.
Oh, go ahead,
first.
let the board, I'll go last.
Oh, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Bill, for making this look easy. I have a Zoom committee meeting that I have to chair next week. So thank you, Bill.
Okay. Alan.
Yeah, I just want to say that I joined mostly to kind of monitor the meeting and see how it went and make sure that TBARTA is got a process going forward that will make sure we're compliant with the Sunshine Law and the governor's executive orders. And I thought the meeting went very well. And I congratulate you, Chair, and Chris for doing such a great job in getting this point. Chris and I had a number of conversations last week, and I think the end result was a very good meeting. And so I think you guys did a great job, and I congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's no other hands up and no other business, I would just close by thanking Chris Jadek for being our technical manager here. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
I love that picture.
Oh, good job. We got through it.